Jumper actually has, this is a testament to you, I don't think No Jumper is a hip hop platform.
We're bigger than
I think that No Jumper
largely hip hop.
I think No Jumper is a pioneer in what I call WIC, weird internet culture, and that's not a diss. That's a combination of hip hop, gang culture, tattooed white boys, porn, all of that. There's actually no platform like No Jumper.
Everything that I'm interested in gets thrown in the gumbo.
Right. So there's no platform like No Jumper except No Jumper. Cool. I personally don't think that I don't think that when you say move culture and interviews that move culture, I wouldn't think that I would look at No Jumper as a place that moves culture.
Entire internet is talking about this gay crib right now. I didn't even have anything to do with it. Rick Baby and Crip Mac sit down with him. It sparked a massive conversation about homosexuals and gangs.
I know, bruh.
I helped orchestrate that, even though I didn't know it was happening.
But I just be honest with you, talk your shit, but no.
Yes.
And not the whole internet is not talking about that. And
that's huge. And you're on a different part of the internet.
And that's not a shade to Brick Baby, because I will say this: you do have a good eye for talent. Because when people come in here, and that's just real. When people come in here, when I'm watching Brick Baby, and I'm watching what's the brother that's with Brick Baby when you interview, the guy that sits sometimes he's with Brick Baby. It's you, Brick Baby, and there's another guy I see with Brick Baby sometimes. Am I tripping?
I don't know.
Like a darker skinned guy.
Doug.
Okay.
Doug, right.
When I see those guys,
I wasn't thinking about the No Jumper show.
Right, but when I see those guys, the guys that come in here and normally sit down and do their thing, it's dope. I always see, Adam knows how to spot someone that's good to even come, like Flacco. There's something about Flacco. Flacco has something to where you're like, oh shit. And a lot of times Flacco will be having trouble getting this shit out, but you still stick with Flacco. There's something there. So I'm not saying you're not talented, but I'm saying when you say I'm one of the greatest hip hop podcasters ever, you say you're the greatest hip hop podcaster.
I wouldn't say the greatest. That's the one.
Okay, so who's give me your top 5 hip hop podcasts?
Current? We gotta be current.
Nah, just all time.
Oh. Well, okay. Vlad's gotta be in there.
Okay.
I am hesitant to throw Ack in the top 5 because I feel like he's incredible at what he does. He's very, very good. He's somebody I look up to in terms of the
not traditionally a podcast.
Well, he's only been doing it for a couple of years, so I feel like maybe. But I have to put him right up there. I do look at Joe Budden and Charlamagne, even though I don't think of Joe Budden as an interviewer, and I don't think he's necessarily the best interviewer.
But we didn't say
certainly what he's built as a podcaster, you got to give it to him.
See, even the fact that you would hesitate
Well, because when I'm talking about academics as a podcaster, I'm talking about him as an interviewer.
Right, and it's about more than that, right? Because a lot of people watch podcasts. Most people that watch a podcast, they're coming back for the personalities.
Most of the time, when you talk about podcasting and rap, at least you have interviewers and you have hanging out with the homies talking, or not the homies, but the co-hosts.
Right.
So Joe's very, very much the king of hanging out with the homies talking, right? But as an interviewer,
Rory and Mal
doesn't make that a huge part of his brand.
Rory and Mal will be in there.
Top 5?
No, I'm asking you.
No.
Okay. So who else is in the top 5? So it's you, Joe, Charlamagne, Ack. Who else? Who's 5th? Gilly, Wallow and Gilly?
Get it.
I like those guys.
You think you're better than Gilly and Wallow?
I like them. I respect what they're doing a lot, but it's not my favorite podcast.
Okay. Do you think that there's parts of Gilly and Wallow's podcast that maybe you can't relate to? Because maybe
for sure.
It's a little bit
there's a lot of
to us.
There's just a lot of
fuck. I'm already up, bitch.
The subject's statements. It's a lot of It's just not. It's not.
I get ready for work soon in this bitch.
You know what it is? You know what it is? Do you like Drink Champs?
Got a huge amount of respect for Nori.
Do you like Drink Champs? See, you can't not talk your shit. Talk your shit.
I have a huge amount of respect for Nori. But is he my favorite interviewer? Probably not.
Do you know why?
What?
Because they're not messy. Because they get people on there and they get to the center of people's stories. They talk to people. They celebrate people, right? They get to the center of it. When you watch Gilly and
I can give you a
Wallow,
much more nuanced critique off camera. But I refuse to disrespect people that I
that's
have
not about
huge
disrespect.
respect
But
for.
what I'm telling you, sometimes, like when I watch Nori and them, and a lot of times, to be honest with you, these are not hard-hitting interviews, but these interviews are full of joy and life. And when Wallow does have to relate something to somebody, or Gilly does have to relate something to somebody, who they are culturally and the power that they have from their experiences, it always resonates with who they're talking about. They're not gonna get nobody on their podcast and ask them who they beefing with, or which body they took down, or how many ops they gonna kill on Saturday. They're not gonna do that. They're not, because they have a cultural edict to be able to talk to these brothers in nourishing ways, right? So like, I don't expect you to like that, but it's really interesting that you have a problem with a podcast that really...
Don't drag me into this beef. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just talking about who I personally think are the top 5 podcasters. Who was the first name I said? I said Vlad.
Right.
Vlad to me does the best job of getting to the brass tacks. You know?
It's an interview.
Yeah,
I go in there all the time.
He's meticulous and detailed and informative, and that is something I aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I listen to a Vlad interview, there's usually a moment where I'm like, ooh, that's a fucking ill question right there. That was a perfect question that he just asked.
He's
Incredibly well researched. Sometimes it's his research team is probably helping him put together these questions and stuff like that, but I have a huge amount of respect for it.
Let me ask
You know,
this.
there's a thing that people do on podcasts a lot. They'll be doing an interview. Hey, let's go outside hip hop. You know, I just drove to Palm Springs and back. Listen to a 4-hour Joe Rogan and Post Malone interview.
Okay.
This was the most normie-ass interview I've ever listened to in my fucking life. There was not one moment where Joe Rogan asked Post Malone anything that was specific to what it is like to be Post Malone or what it is like to be one of the most successful pop stars in the game. To me, that's kind of a waste of audio, of time. You know, they're having conversations about, oh, AI is crazy. They're having conversations about, hunting and about, all these different
I'll be
things.
Post Malone. You interview me, you Joe Rogan right now.
To me, I
Like,
just,
let's do it. Like, I'm Post Malone.
and I'm Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I mean, while I'm
Hold on, I'm Post Malone. Hold on.
while I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself, of all the questions that I would ask Post Malone in that moment, to me, they have like a great 4.5 hour like throwdown. But to me, it's like I want to ask Post Malone the things that only he can answer in the best context that I can. And Joe Rogan clearly is not someone who gives a shit about that. He's perfectly happy to let Post Malone ask him about archery for 45 minutes. I respect that.
Well,
That's just not what I want to do.
Something else with Rogan's pod is that Rogan essentially does a pod where a lot of times he obviously tailors the podcast to the interviewee, right? Yeah, asking questions, but a lot of times the person that's coming on the Joe Rogan podcast is essentially a guest host of the Joe Rogan podcast. Mm-hmm. It's them going back and forth, and that's a different thing too, like because you have people that you interview, right, to where you're trying to dig and get to something, right? And then you have people that you come on there and they basically bro out with you as if they're on the podcast all the time. Mm-hmm. Joe's audience comes to the podcast for Joe Rogan, so really he doesn't have to ask Post Malone anything. He can bring Post Malone into the Rogan-verse and ask Post Malone about Biden or the ivermectin or any of those things, and his audience is gonna like it just fine. Like with you, there was a time where it was becoming like and I think now because of the whole cup era or whatever you want to call it, I think people are more interested in. I mean, you said it. I don't know. Once again, I think it's a regular thing that protocols do. But because of that, I think people are more interested in you. But I also think that you're more of a B-side interviewer like Vlad is. Vlad talks back to you more now, but when you're on Vlad, one of the things about going on there is it's really about you when you're on here. It really is about you. Vlad will go back and forth with you a lot, but Vlad asks me questions about my sister and all that stuff. So I think that's probably a little bit different in terms of the way he would interview a Post Malone. This is the whole point. Like, when you say move the culture forward, I'm curious about what you feel like your responsibility to this culture is. Because when I think about move the culture forward, when you talk about something that makes a lot of noise, everybody is one crazy snapshot, crazy fucking incident. Like, we had Emmanuel Acho on the podcast, and me and Emmanuel Acho go back and forth because Emmanuel Acho is Nigerian, and I'm whatever, and it's in the New York Post, right? It's
Who is that?
Emmanuel Acho is he's a sports commentator, right?
Okay.
So he's on there. Me and him started going back and forth, and all of a sudden, it's in the New York Post, and everybody's talking about it, blah blah blah, because he's on Fox. He's on Fox and stuff. So you're always one interaction away from having something go viral.
Introducing Auto-Tune Vocal Compressor, the world's first.
Friday, bro. Where the fucking music at, bro? I'm all in the fucking shit.
Before we start this video, I just wanted to say I'm dedicating all of the revenue from this video to Destroy Lonely and Lil 1 DTE's mom, because their funeral costs are going to be super high after Lil Uzi Vert did not end up dropping Barter 16. But enough of that, because it's getting too dark. Basically, today we're going to be talking about how Barter 16 is already ruined by the leaks, and just in general how leaks are ruining albums nowadays. Now, I'm not saying there's only negative effects, because there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, as we've seen with Eternal Atake and Whole Lotta Red, where the leaks actually helped increase the hype for those albums, which then obviously were super successful, even though they didn't necessarily release any of the leaks, which some people would say that the version 1s of each of those albums were actually better, and therefore leaks may have ruined the quality of it, but that's for your own interpretation. But even with losing Destroy Lonely and Lil 1 DTE's mom, we do have some good news in that about a week later on Ike Beats, which is one of Lil Uzi Vert's producers, on his Instagram story, we found a track list in the background on a whiteboard that said Barter on it, and therefore it's likely the Barter 16 track list, or at least one of the versions, including some songs that we've actually already heard because of leaks. But unfortunately, with knowing what songs were going to be on this album, I assume whoever was privately holding these songs without anybody else knowing decided it was time to sell some of these songs, or just leak them in general, because when the song actually officially releases, there's no point in privately holding it because it becomes worthless. Everyone can access it through just Spotify. And so that's why a lot of times when we find out which songs are on albums, the song tends to leak. And usually I'd say this isn't a big deal. However, Lil Uzi Vert's label, Generation Now or Atlantic, did not take it this time lightly, because as I posted on Twitter and Instagram, any related content to the situation where a lot of the songs on that whiteboard were leaking were removed from social media platforms. Like, we didn't even post the audio of the songs on Instagram, yet the post was still taken down for stating that multiple songs from Lil Uzi Vert's Barter 16 have allegedly leaked. Like, that's technically not even copyright infringement or anything, but anyway, seemingly because of this, the album didn't end up dropping on that next Friday, even though once again Uzi